That was just the best way ever to start a dean's lecture. At this time, I would like to welcome up Elder Margaret George to offer a land acknowledgement.
It was just sort of, I thought it was just going to be a talk and we're going home. But this is absolutely amazing. And just a quick prayer and we'll hear someone's talk, another part of history. This is so interesting because it's part of the truth and reconciliation for each and every one of us coming from different borders, traveling so far to be here, those who have come to be with us. I hope that you're treated well when you've come. I know it's been difficult for a lot of us of color to deal with racism and discrimination, and we need to break that bond and start being family. You are now part of SFU's family. If you weren't before, you are now. There's our leader sitting over there shaking her head. Just a quick prayer. Great Spirit, thank you for bringing us together this evening. Just guide each and every one of our friends here. Just open doors for us and for them to continue teaching us. I ask Great Spirit to bless their families who are not with us this evening, who are at home, and the children. We are leaders and mentors, and those who follow us, we need to always bring good words and good actions to the young ones. And I ask Great Spirit to always remind us all my relations, and thank you again.
While we wait, I would love to ask you once again, first of all, I want to introduce Albert St. Albert.
I have to say that I have to give all power to the indigenous people of this land for inviting us in this land, for allowing us to do what we're doing here. And
it doesn't work. It's all right.
It doesn't work. Africa is a massive continent with 55 countries and thousands of languages. And we just like to just touch on it a little bit because we are the fathers, or our ancestors were the fathers and mothers of everyone on this planet. Everyone on this planet. But we like to especially give thanks to the Squamish, Jan, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam. We have these lands on that we practice our art and our love. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we introduce the other performer, I just want to acknowledge that Albert St. Albert took field schools from Simon Fraser, was a professor, was as an instructor here for many years, and led a field school to Ghana.
Ghana, West Africa. I had a grad student who did his PhD in education, but he was Ewe, and I went to Ghana and I discovered that there were so many different other cultures in Ghana, and it was amazing when we went and explored. I had people in Ghana tell me, "You've gone more places in Ghana than we've gone." I said, "Well, you got to get out of the cultural traps that you find the colonial will put you in, and that's the difficulty of all of us. So we're trying. Someday we will be free to be a people, one people, the human family."
You give a professor a Nike, right? And I want to introduce Yvonne Bleu. I probably didn't do that justice. She is 5 years old. And her dad who you have already heard is a PhD student here, and Dr. Henry Daniels, student from originally from Uganda, and Edward, we just really appreciate your time. Amazing.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. That, as I said, was the most wonderful way to open a Dean's Lecture. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you again, Elder Margaret, for offering the land acknowledgement to get us started. This is the SFU Library Dean's Lecture on Information and Society. I'm Gwen Bird, and I have the great pleasure of being the Dean of Libraries here at SFU. And I'm so pleased to welcome all of you here this evening for conversation and poetry and a lecture featuring Dr. Afua Cooper, who just last week was bestowed with an honorary doctorate from SFU. One of the great joys of the position that I hold at SFU is the opportunity to create public events such as this, to build community and to showcase brilliant thinkers and writers, and this evening performers as well. This annual lecture provides a venue for conversations about the role of information in contemporary society, very broadly conceived. We give our guest lecturers the widest possible decision about how they want to address that broad topic. We use it to address topics that will help build a more peaceful, just, and equitable world for all. And I want to acknowledge with great, deep gratitude that this series is generously funded by the Thakore Learning and Events Endowment. And I want to thank the Thakore family for making this annual event possible. And it's so wonderful to have so many of you here with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. We do have a photographer at the event tonight, Edward, in the back. And if you prefer not to be photographed, please let one of the staff members know, and we'll make sure to respect your choice. Just note also that there are all gender bathrooms at both ends of this floor in this building. And that at the end of the lecture this evening, a few SFU student respondents will be asking questions, but there isn't going to be an open Q&A. I also really want to thank our event partners, the SFU Black Caucus, and the SFU Institute for Black and African Diaspora Research and Engagement. And I really hope this is the beginning of a long and lasting relationship. And now I would really like to welcome Ebony Magnus up. Ebony is head of the Bellsburg Library here at the Vancouver campus, and she will introduce our speaker. Ebony.
As we do, June and I just had a quick conference about who's speaking next. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I could easily spend the next hour introducing our speaker, but you're not here for me, so here we go. Dr. Afua Cooper is a multidisciplinary scholar, author, and artist whose immeasurable contributions to the fields of literature, history, humanities, education, and civil rights continue to shape Canadian and international society. She is an award-winning author with 12 books published across such genres as history, poetry, fiction, and children's literature. Founder of the Black Canadian Studies Association, Dr. Cooper is renowned for her examination of slavery, Black education, women's studies, and the African diaspora. With a PhD in Black Canadian history and African diaspora studies from the University of Toronto, Dr. Cooper serves as a full professor at Dalhousie University's Department of Sociology and Social Anthropology, with cross appointments in the Department of History and Gender and Women's Studies. She also holds a prestigious Killam Research Chair at Dalhousie. As a result of her scholarship and praxis, Dr. Cooper was awarded a $1 million grant from the Department of Canadian Heritage to direct the project, A Black People's History of Canada. Yes. Might I just add, this is the very truncated version of the achievements and accomplishments of Dr. Afua Cooper. Dr. Cooper is a recipient of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Award, the Portia White Prize, a Governor General's Award nomination, and internationally, the Beacon of Freedom Award. She was Halifax's Poet Laureate from 2018 to 2020. She is Canada's representative on the UNESCO International Scientific Committee for the Slave Root Project, and Essence magazine named her one of the 25 women who are shaping the world. Her connections to SFU run deep. Dr. Cooper held the Ruth Wynn Woodward Chair in SFU's Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies in 2008-09, and she was featured as a speaker for the 2021 President's Dream Colloquium. And last week, as Gwen mentioned, she became doubly doctoral when SFU conferred on Dr. Cooper the degree of Doctor of Letters honoris causa. Yes. In her address to graduates last week, she talked about Josephine and Philip Sullivan, two Black pioneers who owned businesses in what we now know as East Vancouver. Dr. Cooper remarked on the fact that we know many names associated with the building of this city, but Sullivan is not one of them. Her work leading the development of a Black people's history of Canada sets out to rectify the all too common historical erasure suffered by the Sullivans and so many Black Canadians. Afua Cooper is also Jamaican. Yes. And in Jamaica, there is a saying, "We liko but we talawa." We're small, but we're strong, powerful. There is nothing little about the presence of Dr. Cooper, but it is impossible to understate the power of her decades-long creative, scholarly, and community-driven work. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Afua Cooper.
So those slides cover the country, well, a big part of the country. Cover the history, the Black history of a big part of the country. In 1792, 15 ships left from Halifax Harbor and sailed to Sierra Leone, taking about 1,200 people with them, children, men, women. They were fleeing racial oppression, slavery, social exclusion. So they thought they would leave. Canada was not the beacon of hope or freedom for them. They eventually found that in Freetown, Sierra Leone. These are the refugees from the War of 1812, 30 years into the future after the Black Loyalists' departure. And I chose that image because it's beautiful, it's colorful, it's hopeful. So the images, you know, you have the kind of hard ones of slavery, people running away, education being sought after by Black people throughout these many centuries of settlement here, interspersed with run away from the subscriber, a Negro boy named Dick. And that's an image of Maroon captain. The Maroons were exiled from Jamaica and sent to Nova Scotia in 1796. That's why I call my talk Journeys, because there's this constant flow, constant movement of people within the African diaspora. And you know Rosemary Brown, I'm sure. Most people here would. I thank you very much for inviting me. You're a great audience. You gave me a standing ovation before I said anything. I think maybe I could just leave after. I would say to Madam President Joy Johnson to just have Albert and Edward and the beautiful daughter continue, because they were just so magnificent. But I'm here to, so I have to give my talk, which will be a reading. So thank you all for coming out. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to, I see old friends, I see new friends. It's a great pleasure. I thank the President, Madam Joy. I thank Elder Margaret. I thank June Francis for hosting me and for making this happen in so many ways. I thank the Black faculty, the Black Caucus, for all your contributions. I am thinking that at the convocation ceremony last Thursday, when I gave my talk, I said it feels like a homecoming, and indeed it is. I didn't realize then how much of a homecoming this was gonna be, because in 2009, in this very room, I launched the Black communities in British Columbia. It was BC 150, 2008, 1858. It was in this very room that I launched that project. And I just remember looking out at the water and also speaking about the water, the importance of the water in the history of Black people around the world. So this is amazing. I want to thank the drummers, Albert and Edward, and the princess. You see that, there's a film that's current. I don't know how many people have seen the film. It's called The Woman King. Well, there, we have the Princess King. There she is, our Princess Queen. So this has been tremendous. This has been tremendous, or this is tremendous. Talking about Woman King, it's about the women fighters of Dahomey, the king of Dahomey, or the kingdom, I should say, 'cause it wasn't just one king, had a core of women fighters, and they also doubled as the king's bodyguard. So they were part of the military, but maybe the movie sort of gave the image that they were the entire military. They were part of the military. And I think Viola Davis did. She's really kick-ass. And it's important that these stories be told. And so this poem is called Fire Woman 2. And I brought up the Woman King because there was a time when I was writing my, maybe it was my third collection of poetry. It was called Copper Woman. And I was playing with the image of copper and the color red and fire and so on. And I would get these dreams as I worked on the manuscript. And this is like a real dream. Old women, perhaps from Dahomey, crept in my house dressed in robes of crimson and breathed upon me their breath of fire. They took charge of my house, painted its walls red. This caused the unwanted occupants to flee. Then they gave me a fire bath, said it would make me invincible. For my sustenance, they fed me grapes from Martha's vineyard, the juice of which warmed my blood and caused me to utter in scarlet tongues. For my birthday, they gave me live coals, then changed my name to Ruby. So Dahomey, which is now the present-day Kingdom of Benin, which borders with Nigeria and Togo and Burkina Faso to the north, which is also the homeland of voodoo. It was from Dahomey that the enslaved people who went to Haiti, many of them came from Dahomey, the Kingdom of Benin. Dahomey, or Benin, Republic of Benin, is perhaps the only country in Africa that has an indigenous religion as its state religion. So voodoo is a state religion of Dahomey. It's a it's a place where there's lots of history, lots of culture, lots of resistance. And Dahomey carries itself, or its culture is carried into the New World, into the Caribbean, and into other places because of the experience of slavery. So it is this journey that we take, that we embark on as people of African heritage. This journey, especially us on this side of the world, that's rooted in enslavement and that's rooted in colonization. When I was growing up in Jamaica, in Westmoreland, I was born in a parish called Westmoreland, which is, as the name implies, it's on the western side of the island, most westerly part of the island. And Westmoreland was and is a sugar parish. Its raison d'etre was the growing of sugarcane. And sugarcane, of course, was cultivated by enslaved Africans. So the entire parish, the entire island was consumed by sugar production. And, you know, I went to a school, a primary school called Petersfield School that was literally in the middle of a cane field. And where we lived was in the hills, on the mountains. And those hills and mountains were the backlands of the estate because the plantation people, they monopolized all the flat lands, the lands with the nice rivers and waterways and, you know, ocean and so on. And but the backlands were used to cultivate food crops. The backlands were where they got firewood and that sort of thing. Eventually, when slavery ended, many of the formerly enslaved people went and lived in those hills. For years, decades, squatted on the land, not having title for the land. But one of the things they did, I always say enslaved people or their descendants supported themselves. They were the ones who looked after themselves, even in slavery. Slave masters didn't look after them. They were the ones who planted the food, the provision grounds, who built the homes. They were the architects. They were the chemists. They converted the sugar into all sorts of byproducts, like molasses and rum. So for centuries, they gave their labor, their skills, their talents, their intellectual property to the creating of a country, of a colony in which they were marginalized. But on this issue of provision ground, growing up, everybody had a provision ground. A provision ground is a place where you plant food, typically, but not necessarily confined to root crops. And my father was a mechanic by trade. He wanted to be an agronomist, but he had 9 children, so he couldn't go to agricultural college. But his uncle was like a roots man, a farmer, and his uncle taught him everything. So I grew up with all these provision grown at the back of our house. Then my parents also rented a property, and they planted yams and root crops called badu and those kind of crops. And everybody, it didn't matter who you were or what you did for a living. You could be a school teacher. You had a provision ground. And so when I go back to Jamaica and go back to my parents' home, there, that's that tree that was planted by my grandfather, that breadfruit tree, the ackee tree, all those things are still there. It's so going back to that place. It's not like you just go to a house and there's a land and a river running by it. It's like going back into history, going back into family, going back into lineage, going back into this genealogy. So I wrote this poem for the men in my family. My father planted a provision ground with yams of all sorts, yellow yam, white yam, negro yam, afu, lucy, even yampi, and sweet potatoes with red skin, golden skin, white skin, and pumpkin, squash, dasheen, badu, cocoa, cassava, cucumber, and other roots and vine crops. Gongo peas, or Congo peas, okras, plantains. He planted breadfruit and ackee trees, and like the agronomist he wanted to be, crafted a tree that bore June plum, avocado, and jackfruit at the same time. For short term, Dad planted a callaloo patch with bok choy, spinach, bell pepper, bird pepper, scotch bonnet, carrot, garlic, onions, scallions. My father always praised the soil. Decades before, my grandfather planted citrus groves with sweet orange, civil orange, tangerine, lime, and the startling lemon, and grapefruit trees that every season bore so much that neighbors, friends, and passers-by invited themselves into our yard to partake. Grandfather also planted coconut trees, made his own oil and milk from the coconut flesh, grew sugar cane, had his own mill that pressed the juice from the cane, made wet sugar and molasses, tended a cocoa walk from which he prepared chocolate to make hot cocoa drink, which he sweetened with wet sugar and flavored with coconut milk, nutmeg, and cinnamon powder for us. Grandfather also planted corn. These men built a well with a spout pointing in each of the 4 directions that carried water to irrigate the crops they planted. Thank you. The child is alive. So I took a scene from a film. The film is called Sankofa. It was done by a filmmaker called Haile Gerima. And in this film is a birth scene on a plantation. A woman runs away. She's highly pregnant. And she's caught. She runs away from slavery. She's caught. Her punishment is 100 lashes. Of course, she dies. And there's another woman on the plantation, a midwife person, who said, look, this woman is dead, but she's come to term. Let's see if we can save the child. The midwife woman, I link to Queen Nanny of the Jamaican Maroons. Nanny was a leader. She was a chief. She was a military strategist. She was a herbalist. She was a doctor. She cared for her community. She led her community, the Portland Maroons, into, into war with the British, the first Maroon War in 1733. So here the Maroons were led by this woman. Her name was Nanny. Talk about a woman king. Here she was an original woman king. So I link the woman in the movie who was a midwife to Queen Nanny of the Jamaican Maroons. And a niece of Granny Nanny, an Akan woman, a woman who can see far, a woman with the knowledge of herbs, a woman who works in the field cutting cane, a woman who speaks the language of her grandmothers, a woman who tells stories of talking trees and of magical animals and of fabled cities beneath mighty rivers, a woman who was stolen from her village when she was 14, a woman who was raped on the slave ship by sailors, a woman who flies to Africa when she sleeps. This woman, this niece of Granny Nanny, takes her cutlass and runs with the swiftness of Sogolon Conde in her guise as Buffalo Woman. This woman runs with her machete. This woman runs with her machete, an ancient chant rising from her throat, an ancient chant imploring God and all the spirits that attend women in childbirth to come to her aid. She says, form a circle around the dead woman. Breathe, give her breath, give her life. Breathe, give her breath, give her life. Help her to birth this child. This woman, this niece of Granny Nanny, enters the circle, and with her cutlass, the ancient chant leaping from her lips, cuts open the belly of the dead woman and releases the child. Oh, praise to God. The child is alive. Oh, Onyame, take the spirit of the mother. Praises, praises, praises. In the midst of our misery and pain, in the midst of our humiliation and grief, in the midst of this inhumanity, praises to God, because the child is alive. Oh, Onyame, take the spirit of the mother. Our world is turned upside down. Day becomes night and night becomes day, and the dead is giving birth to the living. This woman, this niece of Granny Nanny, this ancient midwife, dances with the child, backward, forward, spins and joins her companions, dancing like the priestess she would have been had not slavery stolen her away from her people. The woman dances east, west, north, south. She holds the child up to the sky. Blessings, blessings, blessing. Oh, Onyame, take the spirit of the mother. Our world is turned upside down. Day becomes night, and night becomes day, and the dead is giving birth to the living. Oh, Onyame, take the spirit of the mother. But oh, praises to God. Oh, praises to God. The child is alive. Why? 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 The child is alive. Thank you. This issue of the dead is giving birth to the living, that's how I see enslavement. It's within the degradation, within the death, within the terror, there is a regeneration. We know it to be so, because I am here. I'm standing on the stage. So someone survived, so that I could be here. I think it's quite profound, you know. So many people died during the Middle Passage. Historians tell us at least 2 million people That's what they think. They're not sure. I'm sure it's more that those bones are littering still are littering the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Can you imagine that? So many people died, thrown off ships, murdered, thrown to the sharks, and it's like pure terror. There's a slave ship called the Zong, Z-O-N-G, and that was the story of the Zong when the captain decided to throw overboard 133 people, or about that number, so he could collect insurance for these people in London when he went home to England, because he said the ship ran out of water, and he didn't have enough water to give the captives, so he threw them overboard. This whole issue of, enslavement of African people, their labor, the slavery itself, creating wealth for the Western world is not a fiction, it's not a fantasy, it is real. We know Lloyd's of London, this great insurance, place, great financier, started its life by insuring slave ships. That's how Lloyd's of London came about. All these big banks, the Banks of England, Barclays Bank, all investors in the slave trade, Barings Bank. There was a man named Hans Sloane who was a naturalist. He is one of the founders of the British Museum. Well, Hans Sloane, his wife owned plantations in Jamaica. And so at the end of the 17th century, he traveled to Jamaica, then he went to Barbados, gathering specimens, flora, and then taking them back to England and, opening up the museum. So these are institutions that we revere, and they're, part of the cultural world of the West. And here they are, founded in slavery. Our own revered Hudson's Bay Company was started by slave money, Jamaican plantation money. The royal family, Queen Elizabeth passed away recently, was buried. Queen Elizabeth I was a big investor in the slave trade. She sent her favorite pirate, Sir John Hawkins, to do the work. And the Royal African Company was chartered by the Duke of York and his brother, and other members of the royal family and nobility. Royal African Company had the monopoly for the British slave trade for a full 80 years before they opened it up to independent entrepreneurs. Everybody was getting upset that how come the Royal African Company has monopoly of this gold, of this oil, slave trade. Black people's body was the oil of the day. So they clamored and got the trade open up. So you walk everywhere, and there it is. There it is, a slave woman, or the enslaved man, or the enslaved child peeking from around the corner, sort of confined to the dustbins of history. But I love it. I love the whole idea of fugitivity, because when you're a fugitive, you kind of peep and come out, and sometimes you declare yourself. And it is part of this declaration. I see my being on this stage part of this declaration. Every single day, we fight against marginalization. Thank you. Thank you. And against efforts to silence us. Now, there was one woman called Peggy. And oftentimes, enslaved people don't have a name. They're called Jim or Edward or Peggy. And they're fortunate when they get even a first name. Well, Peggy and her 3 children, Jupiter, Amy, and Millie, were owned by a man named Peter Russell and his sister Elizabeth Russell. And Peter Russell was the former administrator of Upper Canada, which is Ontario, and they lived in Toronto. And Peggy was in the habit of running away. So this poem is called Fugitive. And I read Elizabeth, or parts of Elizabeth Russell's diary, and in which she talked about Peggy. And it's a great diary to read. It's, end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. And she talks about the town of York, Toronto, so you can kind of see, Toronto growing in the pages of Peggy's diary, Elizabeth Russell's diary. But then she also talked about the slave family that she owned. Peggy is in the habit of running away. It would be bad enough if she left by herself, but now she's taking her children with her. She's a very bad woman, a mean slave. She's a very bad woman, a mean slave, and I have my pages mixed up. Even though I thought I prepared them before I left here. So Peggy is subverting this reading. So I'll go on to another one, and I'll come back to Peggy later on. Confessions of a Woman Who Burnt Down a Town. Albert talked about my book, The Hanging of Angelique, which is in Montreal. So now I leave Toronto, I'm in Montreal, in 1734. And this woman, Marie-Joseph Angelique, was charged with burning down the city in July 1734. And she was arrested and charged, went before the courts, found guilty, and executed. She was executed by hanging. So within enslavement, she had 3 children, 2 of whom were twins. I buried the twins that evening. They died of smallpox, were only 8 months old. Madame came to the funeral and said to me by way of consolation, "C'est la vie. I too have lost my own." I went back to work in Madame's house that same evening, and at supper she yelled at me and boxed me full in the face because I overturned the gravy bowl in her lap. I remember my journey to this island of Montreal from Albany, New York. Monsieur came from Montreal on one of his business trips. He bought me because he said I looked like a healthy wench. He died soon after, and Madame never forgave me. But I had nothing to do with it. He died from consumption. The twins died too, and after we buried them that evening, my heart changed position in my chest, and I was seized with one desire and one desire only, and that was to leave the prison of this island. But where could I go? Because throughout the whole world, in all the continents, people who looked like me were bound, but still all I could see was my foot them running, no chains, no ropes, no shackles, running free. Madame talking to her best friend and confessor, Father Labadie. She said, "I'm going to sell that negress. She getting too much for me. She getting too uppity. And furthermore, since Francois died, I just can't seem to manage. Perhaps the church is interested." I bring in the food and pretend like I never hear, and I serve the food good and proper, was on my best behavior, roll back my lip and skin my teeth, roll back my eye and show the white. Then I went back to my room in the cellar and I met my plan. Smoke, smoke, too much smoke. I only intend for one house to burn. Fire, fire, too much fire. But it done gone so already, and I running, my feet unshackled. I running, unbound, free, running past the city limits, while behind me the fire rage, and my raging heart changed back into its rightful position. He was running too, Claude Thibault from France, and I gave him all my food to take me and show me the way to New England, but him take the food while I was sleeping, and the constables them catch me. I don't utter a word as I sit in the jailhouse. Father Labadie come to confess me, but I refuse. Dear God is not my God. Arson is one of the worst crimes in New France, Marie, he said to me. Confess now and save your soul. But I don't hear him. Outside, the mob want to rip me from limb to limb. But I'm not afraid. A strange calm fills my body, and I'm at peace, peace, perfect peace. Guilty, the judge pronounced, and the sentence to be tortured, to have my hands cut off, my body burned, and the ashes scattered to the four corners of the earth. I broke down then. My body crumpled in a heap, and before my eyes I see the twins, and they look so alive, as if they're waiting for me to come and nurse them. Them reduce the sentence. Now them just going to hang me and burn my body. And Father Labadie come back for his confession, and I confess, it's I, Marie, who set the fire. I said yes. I started in Madame's house down by the river. 50 buildings destroyed, the hospital, the cathedral. I said yes. It's I, Marie, who burned this city. So write that down, Father Labadie. Write down my story, so then we know it, then we know it in a them history. With my heart burning, I take the sacrament and accept the final rites. Outside, the guard is waiting to take me to my dying. Outside, the guard is waiting to take me to my hanging. Outside, the guard is waiting to take me to my burning. Oh, soon I will be free from the prison of this island, and I will fly and fly, woo! This bright evening, now my work is over, I will fly away home. Little bird, petit oiseau, fly. Checking the time. Thank you to the sponsors, to the Thakore family. Thank you so much for making this happen. I'll read this one. It's called Child of Mine. And I dedicate it, since the dance was dedicated to me by the beautiful child, I dedicate this poem to the beautiful child, to the woman, princess dancer. So, I'm a historian, and I work in archives. And when I was thinking about what I would do for tonight, I'm the guest of the libraries. It's gonna be evening. I'm working in the archives. I'm bringing all these documents out. So I'm thinking about the archives by night, the library by night. You know, Albert Manguel, he has a book, The Library by Night. And what am I going to say? What do I want to say? What do I want to impart? It's such a great privilege to be on this stage, to speak, to share what I've learned with you all. I don't take it for granted. It's such a privilege. There's a verse or a line in the psalm that says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O God, It's every time I do a reading, I say that little prayer. Because I'm saying and what I'm thinking, I want it to be beautiful, even if the subject matter is not so beautiful. So, there's a book, a military register called The Book of Negroes. And it lists the name of about 3,000 people, men, women, and children. Some of them went on that ship to Sierra Leone, by the way. But they were leaving New York Harbor. The Americans had won the war, American War of Independence, and the British had lost. And the British had promised some of these Africans who had fought on their side that they would transport them to a British colony. So there's a scribe writing down the names of all these people. And sometimes when it came to the children or the babies, they couldn't even be bothered. Like, maybe they were tired, 3,000 people, it's a lot. So they would just say, oh, your name is Venus, you have a baby, child of Venus. So there's Venus and her child goes on a ship, which ends up in Nova Scotia. So there are so many of these, child of. So I started writing them down and made this poem. Some black loyalist infants and babies listed in General Guy Carleton's Book of Negroes, 1783, New York Harbor. Child of Sarah, child of Venus, child of Hagar, child of Chloe, child of Peggy, child of Patty, child of Dinah, child of Thomas, child of Betsy, child of Mary, child of Guinea, child of Few, child of Prince, child of Abigail, child of Warner, child of Cooper, child of Allen, child of Violet, child of David, child of Westcott, child of Willoughby, child of Effie, child of Caesar, child of Century, child of Isabella, child of Lucinda, child of Jupiter, child of Gambia, child of Campbell, child of Johnson, child of Watson, child of William, child of Bing, child of Tynes. Oh, sweet baby, darling, child of mine. So here's a child to whom we are all grateful. Because of this child, so many EDI positions have opened up. The poem is called I Breathe My Breath Into Him. And when George Floyd died, like many people, I took to bed for a week. I just said, I can't handle this. I called my chair of my department. I'm going to bed. See you in a week. I wasn't so dramatic, but I did take time out. How do you process that? My way was just going to bed. So I was thinking of this issue of breath and breathing, and because a man's life was snuffed out of him. And a poem for George Floyd, who was murdered on 25th May 2020 by police officers in Minneapolis. This whole issue of breath. The breath is so important. People, without it, we will breathe for as long as we live, right? Can you imagine? We'll breathe for as long as we live. Between our birth and our death, we will breathe. We're breathing. And, many cultures, the yoga, if you do yoga and breathing meditation. So I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do with this? Then there's Mamie Till, the mother of Emmett Till. I think there's a movie coming out now on Emmett Till. Emmett Till was 14 years old. He was a boy, he was a child, and he too was murdered. They literally took his breath away. And Mamie, he was so disfigured, but his mother said, no, I'm going to have an open casket. I want everyone to see what they've done to Emmett. So I link Emmett Till to George Floyd. Mamie Till said she had an open casket for her child Emmett, the 14-year-old boy who was murdered in Mississippi by white men in 1955. She had an open casket because she wanted the world to see what they had done to her beautiful son. Emmett's face disfigured, his body disfigured, his face twisted. My son is the sacrificial lamb, Mamie said. And along the way, there were so many like him: Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, Amadou Diallo, Sandra Bland, Junior Alexander Manon, Anthony Griffin, Fred Hampton, and now you, George Floyd, African lion from Mamprusa land, great-great-grandson of Soninke, running from the cotton fields of the South to the ice floes of Minneapolis. Wailing shall be in these streets. Wailing shall be in these streets. Call out the wailers. Sound the mourning drums. Sound the Nyabingi drums. Throw the ashes on our heads as we clothe ourselves in sackcloth. Mothers, tie your belly with the mourning cloth. Woman, bang your belly and bawl. Weep, 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 weep. I say, wailing shall be in these streets. Cry, Mamie Till, cry. Beat the drums of sorrow. Doom, do, doom, doom. Doom, do, doom, doom, doom. Wail, mommy, wail. Wail, mommy, wail. Our elephant has fallen. Receive your son. Broadcast the message on the talking drum to the four corners of the earth. Sound the abeng. Blow the conch shell. Wail, woman, wail. The earth is in labor. The Quran 15:29 says, I fashioned him and breathed my spirit into him. And Genesis 2:7 states, God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life and made him a living being. Breathe, George Floyd, breathe. Breathe, George Floyd, breathe. Breathe, breathe, breathe. So, this poem is written in honor of the carnival in Fort-de-France, Martinique, and the genius of the Haitian people. The poem is called Rara, R-A-R-A. Rara is a culture, it's music, it's art, it's dancing. I was in Martinique in 2016. I had gone to do some studies there, but it just so happened it was carnival. I didn't know. I arrived on the island and everything shut down. It's carnival. And my host said, okay, put down your suitcase. We're going to carnival. That was great, 1 week. So you have all these rah-rah bands in Fort-de-France, all over the island, everywhere. There are Martinican rah-rah bands. There are rah-rah bands from Haiti, from Miami, from Panama, from New York City. Whoa. So rah-rah, like I said, is culture. So people will enact a particular something. It could be the fall of the Duvalier regime, for example. It could be the arrival of Columbus. They reenact, historical narratives. And one band that I saw, they were enslaved people, and they had turned the world upside down because they were whipping the enslaver. But they have music, they have flags. It's really something to behold. So in the poem, I link the culture, the struggles of Africa, the Caribbean, also to the indigenous cultures of the Caribbean. Queen Anna Kaona is the Empress of Hispaniola, or was, and she was Queen of Hispaniola when Columbus arrived. What is this I hear? 1,000 drums playing, rat-a-tat, 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 tat, tat, and Max Roach conducting, rat-a-tam-tam-tam, rat-a-tam-tam-tam, trap drums, djembes, and congos, and the voices of 100 archangels chanting into the wind, ra-ra, ra-ra. The drums scream the name of Dahomey. But this is Fort de France. Dahomey is on the other side of the ocean. What is this I hear? Rah-rah drums are waiting in the city. A dog howls. I look through the window. He dives into the other side of the harbor and disappears while swimming. A cock, its circadian clock recalibrated, crows at 15 minutes to midday. Rah-rah rhythms have remade the world. But this is not Haiti. How come these rah-rah people are marching all over Fort de France, sending vibrations into the earth, the air, and the sky, answering secret rhythms with sacred rhythms? I am sure they are not mortal beings, but a celestial horde on the march with Babatunde Olatunji, the sound of trap drums, sa-sa-ye, sa-sa-ye-ing, up to the hills, to Didier, to Trenel, way past Tivoli, to the volcano named Montpellier, and from the peak of the hill, the drummers and trumpeters looked down onto the harbor, looked way past the horizon, and beat their thoughts onto the air, sending back the colonizer and Indian killer Desnambuc to the deepest dungeon of France, recrowning Chatoyer, beating the martial rhythms for triumphant Carib warriors, reversing the slave trade, stitching whole again Africa. And in the distance, from the direction of Lamentin, I hear the pounding of hooves. Doom, 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 doom. The earth trembles in unexpected bliss. I see clouds of brown dust spiraling into the sky. I feel the hot breath of panting steeds rushing toward the city. Somewhere there is a clash of cymbals. A gate opens. Mounted men holding a landscape of Osafa flags rush through. Sparks of fire rise from the horses' hooves. What is this? The cavalry, led by the fugitive named Mathieu Leveillé. From the savannah, the drummers advance, beating on 1,000 drums, beating on horns and trumpets, blowing on horns and trumpets, bamboo sticks, maracas, shaka, 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 sounds not made by human hands. African captives chained at the bottom of the ship, drowned in a shipwreck at Anse Cafard, and from the volcano at Montpellier, I think I hear them weeping, wailing, gnashing their teeth, a fury of chains clanking as the ship crashed on the rocks and sank to the bottom of the sea. Oh, somber ghost stands on the beach. Look across the ocean. Take us back to Benin. Take us back to Benin. Now they walk across the landscape at Diamond Rock, beating their chest and chanting a saltwater dirge. Rah-rah from Dahomey. Rah-rah from Haiti. Rah-rah in Fort de France. Rah-rah blowing onto the Caribbean Sea towards St. Lucie and La Dominique, way up to Les Îles des Vierges and down to the tip of Venezuela, creating this archipelago of rhythms. And then a boy, 14 years old, pierces the air with the fury from his trumpet, And suddenly the cacique Bohichio stirs from his sleep, rubs his eyes, grabs his conch shell, and blows a message to Hatui over in Cuba, and to Louverture, to Desaline, to Christophe, to Cecile Fatima. And I hear someone says, hurricane a blow in breath over the sea. Hurricane a come, unu better run because hurricane a come. Meanwhile, Queen Ana Caona, Empress of Hispaniola, stands on the tallest point of Haiti and begins to whirlwind a dance for final independence. She begins to whirlwind the final dance for independence. Ra, 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 to ra. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's it. C'est tout. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. I just had to kind of free up myself. Let off Steve. So, the questions.
Questions from some students who are in the audience today. So, Alice, Chrissy, who?
Chloe, the last one.
Oh, is that? Okay.
Go ahead, please.
All right. Hello.
Yes, hi.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Chrissy, and I'm a psych major here at SFU. And after listening to your beautiful lecture, I have to say that I was hit with quite a few emotions that had been under, I think, for a long time. So thank you. My question would be, how has that impacted your mental health, the work that you do, the research, the poetry? As a psych major, I feel like generational trauma is so deeply ingrained in Black people that I can't even begin to express how to help anyone with their anxiety without addressing these issues. So I'm just wondering how, even after you mentioned you being in bed after Emmett Till's death, sorry. Yeah, George Floyd's death, yeah. That really, I feel like that hit for me. That's sort of like the impact that would have. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your questions. Yeah, it's a good question. And now we've been talking about that a lot as we become more upfront with how we are feeling, living in context of racial discrimination, social exclusion, anti-Black racism. How do I deal with it? I think that's why I write poetry. Even when I write about the hard things, Peggy running away and Marie-Joseph Angelique, it's a way of, well, it's an artistic expression, but it's also a way of documenting our presence, that we will not be erased. And it's important to build community, to find community, you know. You really can't do it alone. We live in the midst of such violence every day on a day-to-day basis. You need to, and I know many students are international students, they may not have family members close by. You join the student societies. If you're religious, you know, you find a community at your religious place, and so on. And go if you're able to go hiking. And I just, 2 days ago, I took this picture of this mural at the Nora Hendricks place because we also want joy, and we also want leisure, and we also want pleasure. And it's just so beautiful. It's on the side of the building, right here in Vancouver. I can't remember the name of the muralist. But look at all the flowers, the colors, and they're creating culture. They're singing, they're making music. And, you know, in the top row there, are the very top at the back, there are these historical references, right? So they're the black sleeping car porters. There's Jimi Hendrix beside his grandmother, Nora Hendrix. There's Vi from Vi's Chicken Shop, and other figures who helped in growing the Vancouver. So thank you for your question. We have to seek out beauty. We seek out beauty all the time. We have to seek out beauty, you know.
I've got one more question here.
Yes, hi, hello. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I'm over here, sorry, yeah. I had a question about this grant that you got recently, the $1 million grant. You know, it kind of got me thinking about, you know, this is a country in which black people have been erased throughout history. And it seems that this grant that you got is a good first step in the right direction towards giving us a voice, or giving us a presence, or recognizing that erasure has taken place. I'm just wondering, you know, there is always a net zero 2030 and a net zero 2050, but there's no DEI 2060 or 2050. I know it sounds quite odd. Do you think there's a concrete step that can be taken within this next decade for black academics, black scholars, that can, you know, that on top of these grants that can, you know, push us forward?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. I have to say, yes, there are steps that can be taken, that people have taken. We have to be an optimist, you know. You're hoping that every generation things get better, but sometimes that's not necessarily the case. So it has to be a collective effort. That's the only way I see us going forward. You know, here we are, you know, we're standing on the brink of possibly nuclear annihilation. And we, you know, the various isms and schisms that divide us kind of just have to die, really. If we're to survive as a human species, the whole issue of the environment is pressing, right? So, but at the same time, you know, black people here and globally, you know, we are at the forefront of this massive violence against us, against our bodies. If you look at so many of the climate refugees, millions and millions are coming from Central Africa and those places. The wars that have been caused in Africa that have produced all these migrants. So there's a war, then there's the climate changes, like Lake Chad, which was a big lake once upon a time, is like the size of this room now. We know climate change is real, and it's producing millions and millions of refugees. The murder of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya has produced millions and millions of refugees, because that has just destabilized Central Africa, many places in West Africa. As all these guns have now gone across the desert and into the Sahel and other countries, and that was a tragedy. And the West just washed their hands and walked out. And here you are, people dying in the Mediterranean Sea, right? Drowning as they seek to escape from, you know, the issue of climate change and political instability. Geopolitics, it's not only among us, you know, you have all this racism. When you look at the whole geopolitical structure in the world, it's racist. It's built on white supremacy, really. So you can tell whomever what you're going to pay them for their resource. And the whole Bretton Woods agreements and treaties were not meant for people of color. You know, the Bretton Woods agreements made us prostrate, prone.
We have one final student question before we close the evening.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, loud.
Sure.
Okay. Like Chrissy, I have a bit of a personal question, or it's more about you as an individual. When given all the stuff that you do, advocacy, poetry, art, you exist loud and proud. That often comes with putting a target on your own back. I know you don't mean to, you're just existing, but a target is put on your back, I assume, as many other Black women. My question is, how do you deal with that, and what do you do to protect yourself? Because there's some real, as you were saying, violence that comes with even existing, but daring to exist so publicly.
Yes. Thank you, Belkis. I have a panic button in my office. A panic button, it's a button under your desk that you can press. I've received death threats. People have written me letters. I go to my mailbox. I think it's some nice letter from you, and it's a letter, racist letter. I don't let it bother me too much. I report it to the campus police and to the local municipality and all of that. And it's just to be careful, right? How careful can one be? I thought because, I'm in the 18th century, nobody would care. Because that's the work I do, 18th and 19th century. But I'm thinking, everybody's dead. No one. Obviously, some people take issue with that. When I did the August 1st, this year, August 1st, Emancipation Day interview on CBC, and I thought it was I'm just doing an interview talking about reparations, a national apology from the Prime Minister to the Black community. I thought it was pretty innocuous. I wasn't saying anything new, really. And then I received all these, terrible feedback and just attack. I do care in one sense. In another sense, I'm like, you know what? So many people have died so that I could be here, right? So I have this opportunity. But as I said to the first question, the person who asked the first question, you have to build community. You have to engage in community, even if you have just one friend. But there has to be other people. You have to have what I think, I can't remember who said it, maybe Carl Jung, an enlightened witness. You have to be part of a community. You can't do it alone. And I'm a religious person. I'm Muslim. The 5 prayers are like a refuge to me, because at least 5 times a day I go and I get refuge. And I can breathe and I meditate. And just that meditation early in the morning, starting off my day with meditation and prayer, it's like the world. Like, I wouldn't trade that for anything. I can go out there in the world grounded, aware, and feeling connected. Because, I come from rural Jamaica. Everybody there believes in God. There's not a thing where you say, we don't believe in God, So, but we believe in a higher power. I always believe there's a higher power that, the world, we didn't just create the world. The world is so perfect, the galaxies, it's beyond us. We couldn't do this. So I engage the world that way. But my prayers and meditation are what make me able to do what I do in so many ways, along with being part of a community.
That's great.
And now I have the distinct pleasure of thanking you. Please join me in thanking the magnificent Dr. Afua Cooper. I want to specifically thanking you for sharing your poetry, your words, and your wisdom, your reflections on the archives and the library. for sharing some of your dreams with us, the images of abundance in your grandfather's provision ground, for sharing Black history with us and stories of survival. When you quoted the psalm, you said that you want your words to be beautiful even if they convey hard truths, and let me say, they certainly were beautiful. You urged the student who asked you about how you protect yourself and survive to seek out beauty. Thank you for bringing us beauty tonight. Thanks to all of you for joining us this evening, and I would like to take a moment to thank all of those who helped to organize this event, including Chloe Riley, all details large and small, June Francis, Ebony Magnus, Shauna K. Brown, and several from the library, Tony Liu, Deepa Barua, Susie Smith, and many others. Thanks again to our event partners, the SFU Institute for Black and African Diaspora Research and Engagement and the SFU Black Caucus. And thank you again to our event sponsor, the Thakore Learning and Events Endowment. Without you, this would not be possible. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.